Crafty friends, it's Jess from JessCrafts.com, and today I'm here with a card featuring digital stamps and a fun new die from My Favorite Things. I'm going to start with a stamp because I'm going to be doing some colored pencil coloring with Prismacolors. And this stamp was designed by Elena from JustME Digital Stamps. It's an Etsy shop. She also designs for Neat and Tangled, so if the style looks familiar, the Better Together stamp set from Neat and Tangled with the little kids was designed by her. There's a couple others like the circus and the circus theme set from Neat and Tangled, and there's like a lumberjack set. I have admired Elena's illustration style for a long time, and I was really excited to see that she was offering digital stamps as another way to, get more of her designs. And I have used her Christmas digital stamps in the past, but these are a little bit newer, and she seems to come out with some new ones every couple of months. And of course, there are the Neat and Tangled ones that she designs as well. Like there's a new kitty cat that I picked up recently and I showed in my haul video. And so I am coloring this fox, and the digital stamp comes with some options. The fox is either sitting by himself or sitting on a tree stump, and there is a sentiment to go with it. Because it's a digital stamp, I was able to reverse the image and make the two foxes look like they're sitting next to each other with their tails on opposite sides. And so that's one of the nice options about digital stamps. You can create whatever size you want, as well as do some manipulating of the images a little bit. I am coloring these with Prismacolor pencils. I am not an expert in colored pencils, but I'll try to share some things that I do that I like and give me some results. And so here I am starting with my lightest color, and I'm kind of doing what I would do with Copics, where I am layering the colors on top of each other and putting an initial base coat that doesn't entirely cover the area. Because I'm going to be doing some layering and over time trying to build up the color, I'm not so much worried about filling up the complete area the first time through. And so for the orange colors, I'm using 918, 927, 1003, and 1002. I don't really know how to say the numbers with the system, but in case you're interested, I used like 4 different orange colors and this like peach color as well to get these to blend. And what I like about the Prismacolor pencils, besides the fact that they have a really reasonable price point compared to a lot of coloring mediums, Copics are very expensive, give beautiful results, but not in everyone's budget. Whereas the Prismacolor pencils you can get for a pretty reasonable price. But you can really see the details with them. And so here I want the fox to look like he has some texture, that he has some fur. And so I am getting that result by, after I've layered on a good amount of the color and added some variation with the darker at the top to really kind of highlight his eyes, I go back in and I start pressing a little bit harder and a little more distinctly in some areas to look like there are pieces of hair on him. And you really get to see those details where Copics are meant to blend together, and you can certainly get gorgeous blends with Prismacolors. Here I'm trying to bring out that those distinct lines and emphasize those pencil lines. And so I'm able to achieve that look by pressing a little bit more hard on them. And it gives a more distinct line that doesn't blend as well. When you are looking to blend, my recommendation is to go a little bit softer so that you're not coloring the entire piece of paper, because when you layer with the colored pencils, you are trying to fill in a little bit of the paper with the light color and a little bit with the dark color, and them sitting side by side gives a blended look. Again, like I said, I'm not an expert with colored pencils. However, I believe that Sandy Allnock is pretty close to an expert. And so if you want more color pencil tips, I definitely recommend checking out her channel. But I'm trying to use some of those principles that she shares. And you might see that I am wiping away with a paintbrush, because I find that when I'm coloring, sometimes little bits of the pencil will get on the paper, and when I sweep them away, it causes streaks in my paper. And so I have a little bit better result with sweeping things away with the brush. Another important tip that I learned from Sandy was to keep your pencils sharp. It's a lot easier to layer on color when they're sharp because you want to be able to control your pressure. And if you have a duller pencil, I feel like I'm more tempted to color harder to get the color where I want it to go. But when it's very sharp, I can get a nice light layer of color and I can get it exactly where I want it into any of the small areas. And so I found that to be beneficial. I'm not going to show the complete coloring of the fox, as I mentioned. Not an expert, just trying to share a few things that I have found to be helpful. Namely, taking your time, layering on color slowly, and then when you're ready to add those details and you're ready to emphasize things, adding a bit more pressure. Like right there when I wanted to emphasize the lines that Elena put in the stamp on his forehead. There, I am applying a lot more pressure with the pencil and trying to get that distinct line. Not too much to indent the paper, but just a stronger, firmer line. And that's about it in terms of my blending tips. But as you can see here, I went from darker to lighter. So that's a possibility as well and might save you a bit of time and is probably worth it in the smaller areas. Like here I chose to do it with the ears because you don't need to see as much detail. You're really going to focus in on his face. So my foxes are all colored and I fussy cut them out. This is a pretty simple stamp to fussy cut. With digital stamps, obviously you're not going to get coordinating dies. If you have the Brother Scan and Cut, you can cut them out, of course. However, I don't have that yet, and so I just resort to fussy cutting, which is fine by me. Even though I have a lot of dies, I don't find myself needing dies for everything. And so I am going to lay some paper from Lawn Fawn here on my card base. But as I mentioned before, I'm going to be using a die from MFT to create that interesting card setup that you saw at the beginning where the card sort of folds in on itself. But I wanted to show you before I moved on that when I fussy cut, I like to take a black marker and run it along the edges of my image to create a little bit more finished look. If you're not so good with cutting and you don't always cut perfectly on the line, this helps to clean it up. Also, if you have really thin lines, even if you do cut really well, you can tend to have some imperfections. And these digital stamps do have a little bit thinner lines. Like I find something like a company like Lawn Fawn, their lines are a little bit thicker. Now, I cut this sentiment out from the background. So the sentiment is part of the digital stamp, but I placed it all by itself on a piece of paper and printed it out. And then this flip die from MFT Dynamics has a stitched circle that coordinates with it. And so I used that coordinating stitched oval and cut out the sentiment. But now I'm ready to do the flop card because it's called a flop die. And so with the flop card, what you're going to want to do is lay your die down right over your card base, and you want to have any pattern paper already adhered to your card base if you want to create that consistent look. So here you see it cut through the card, the pattern paper, and through the card base. So you'll want to make sure when you put it through your machine, you've opened up the card so you don't cut through the back of the card. And the edges of the die, the long straight edges, those are just scoring edges. They won't cut. The only part that's going to cut is the half oval shape. And so when you cut this half oval shape out and you've scored the edges, when you are finished with the card, you're going to be able to prop it up and the little foxes are going to pop out of the top. So there are more tutorial videos directly from MFT describing the die in a little bit more detail, and I did find that I wanted to take some scrap paper and cut it a few times to really understand how it worked. But basically with my oval on the top half of the card, I was able to then achieve this look where when the card is opened, it can be propped up against the sentiment oval on the inside and have the foxes appear to be sitting up off the edge of this card. So I'll describe that a little bit more as I continue to build the card and create the effect. When you adhere the foxes down, you're only going to want to adhere them to the oval piece. You don't want to adhere them completely onto the card, because when you open the card, you want the foxes to come off of the pattern paper. If they were fully stuck on, then the card would no longer do the opening flop effect. Once I had the front of the card going, I wanted to create the effect at the end where it kind of sits up like an easel. And so I want the card to be able to be propped up on itself. So here I have the sentiment panel from, as mentioned before, and I'm going to use a little bit of foam tape to adhere it to the inside of the card. Normally I wouldn't use foam tape, I wouldn't add dimension to the inside of the card, but in order for me to be able to tuck the front of the card behind it and make the front of the card stand up, it's going to have a little bit of dimension. So I suggest using a thinner foam tape so that you don't have any trouble with it sent through the mail, and they could display it flat as well. But I am just going to put a little bit along the back so it has enough support, stick that down, and then show you how the flop card ends up in effect. Now there are other things you can do with this flop card. You can create a look where when you open the card, an image kind of flops into the back and the front. And like I said, I will leave you a link to the MFT video so you can see some more. But I liked this idea of being able to give someone a card that they can then put on display a little bit easier. So I basically had my card finished at that point, but I felt like when you looked at the front, it looked kind of plain. The added interest was only when the card was open, and so I didn't want it to look unfinished, and so I am going to add a little bit of a sentiment to kind of break up all of that teal pattern paper space along the bottom. So I went to the same coordinating pack of Lawn Fawn paper, and I found this little brown strip that I'm going to stamp a sentiment on. This sentiment is from Avriel. I like this sentiment set because they can reach all the way across a card, and there's a lot of different sentiments like congratulations and celebrate, and it works for a lot of different occasions, but you can use it all the way across the card, whether it is a vertical or horizontal card, as long as it's that A2 size, which is about 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. So I've stamped the sentiment down with VersaFine ink so it'll be a nice dark black, and then I'm going to adhere it along the bottom. When I was working on this card, it was actually quite a while ago, and the Coffee Lovers blog hop was still going, and I thought, oh well, it would be fun to add little coffee cups to these foxes. And so while I didn't wind up actually using it for the hop because I had a lot to do with the Newton's Nook Designs release last month, which is, if you remember, was a huge release, I stamped some of these coffee cups from Newton Loves Coffee, and I'm going to add them to the foxes. Now, of course, it's the whole idea of foxes having coffee cups is absolutely silly, and there's no way these little foxes could be grabbing their coffee cups. But if you did want to make it look like they had their paw around it, you could trim their paw and tuck the coffee cup under it. And I thought about that. However, my foxes were already adhered down, and I was afraid if I pulled them up to try to cut that slit in and put it in their hand, I would ruin my whole card. But if I was going to do it again in the future, I would cut along the lines of their arm and be able to tuck the little coffee cups in there. I'm again coloring with Prismacolored pencils, building up color over time, keeping the pencils sharp, all of these things that I find help to get a nice finished look with them. And I'm trying to create a highlight down the center of the coffee cup just so it has a little bit of a round effect and adds some interest to it. So building that darker color up on the edges. I also find that as I add the darker colors and I'm more sure that I'm finished coloring, like I have the the amount of color that I want, I tend to press down a little bit harder. As I said before, when you're adding that initial first layer, you're trying to leave a little bit of white space essentially for the darker color to come through and blend with it. but as you're more sure that that's your final color and you want to make it a little more dark, adding pressure does add some more detail. Or sorry, adding pressure adds a darker color. Like more pressure gives a darker color with colored pencils. Sorry if that was being unclear. Like I said, I'm still not 100% comfortable with them, but I did want to add some tips because I know people are saying that they use Prismacolor pencils and like hearing a little bit more about them. So because the blue that I found for the colored pencils wasn't quite matching my background piece, I did try to add a little bit of green, and that did change the color to a little bit more of this, I guess, turquoise or blue-green background color here. And then I'm ready to adhere those two little coffee cups with their foxes, and that is going to be it for my card today. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're interested in more crafting tutorials, be sure to subscribe to my channel. As mentioned, I'll leave a link to the video where you can find out more about that flop die and see some of the other possibilities with it, as it is really fun to use and creates a unique display, but also to the products that I used, including the Elena's digital stamp store, because her images are just so cute. And you can also find links to my social media in the video description below. Thanks for watching. Bye.